Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This is the EC2 and customer managed key pairs, and this one is for Mac users only. If you're a Windows user, please skip to the next one and we'll show you how to do it in Windows. So in this lecture, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and generate our own public key and our own private key. We're going to do that on our Mac using OpenSSL. We are then going to import that public key as a key pair into EC2, and we're then going to provision an EC2 instance using that public key, and we would then connect to it using the private key that we've generated. So the key difference here is that we're generating the public key and the private key. We're doing it on our client side. Amazon is not doing it for us, and we are taking responsibility of owning that public key and private key. So this is a lab and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so the very first thing you need to do is download OpenSSL. We did do it in the last section of the course, but if you haven't already, go ahead and download it. Just type OpenSSL into Google, click on downloads, and then download the latest file, and then you need to go in and unzip it. Once you've done that, open up Command Prompt or your terminal window and go over to the OpenSSL directory. Okay, so once you've navigated over to the OpenSSL directory, we need to run this command, and I'll just run through what it is. So we're using the OpenSSL executable, and then we're generating a private key. We're using the algorithm RSA, which you can see up here. The output, we're going to output it to a file called private_key.pem. And then here, this pkey.opt is where we're basically saying what kind of private key or RSA private key we want to generate, how many bits. So we want to generate 2048. So once you do that, just go ahead and hit enter, and it will just do this for a little bit. And there you go. You will be able to see this in your Finder or Windows Explorer window. So if you sort up here by the newest file first, you can see here it is here, so privatekey.pem. So we've got our private key. Now we need to generate our public key. So let's go back over to our terminal window. And then what we need to do is just paste in this command, and these commands will all be in the resources section of the course. OpenSSL, RSA, and then public out, and then in, and then the name of our private key. So we've got to use our private key to generate our public key, and then output, and then the name of our public key. So we're just going to call it publickey.pem. And there you go. You'll see it's successful when it says writing RSA key. So we should have two files now. If I just go back over here, I can see my public and private. We need to change the permissions on our private key. So we'll do chmod 400 and then the name of our private key, so which is private_key.pem. Okay, so we have our public key, we have our private key. Let's go ahead and put this into EC2. So we go over to services and click on EC2. And we're not going to go ahead and create a new key pair. We're going to import a key pair. So go ahead and hit import. And then in here, it says load public key from file. So you can go ahead and hit choose file and load your public key. There is a bit of annoying UI issue here. So if you go ahead and try and hit import, basically it says it's not a valid OpenSSH public key. And it's just because it's got this here, the begin public key. And so we delete that out, and if you go all the way down to the bottom, you delete this out as well, so end public key. It's just a bit frustrating. So go ahead and import it, and there you go. You can see we've got it here called public key. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go in and just provision a EC2 instance. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and just leave everything as default. Go ahead and hit next, and next, add tags. I am going to add a name just so I know which one it is. So name, this will be my new EC2 instance, PK for public or private key. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit next, add it to an existing security group that you've got. Hopefully you've got one with port 22 and port 80 open. And go ahead and hit next, and go ahead and hit launch. And then what we do in here is we go select a key pair. So we want the public key, and go ahead and hit launch instances. So the cool thing about this is Amazon have never seen your private key at all. You know, they haven't generated it for you. They have no record of it. They only have your public key. And the thing to remember about the way cryptography works is the classic example is that a public key is like a padlock, right? You can go out and give a padlock to many different people, have the exact same combination, let's say, and only the private key can open that lock. So I could put a lock on my bike, I could put a lock on, on my door, I could put a lock on the door of my car, and maybe it's all the same lock, but the only key to open that lock is the private key. So that's the way to think about it. Public key you can give out to everyone. Don't ever give out your private key to people. So in here we can see it's initializing, and I'm just going to copy and paste the public IP address into my clipboard. If we scroll down, we'll be able to see the key pair name, public key, and we should be able to SSH into this. So I'm just going to go back over to my terminal window. Okay, so I'm back in terminal. I'm going to clear the screen. So Mac users, just type SSH EC2-user at, and then the public IP address, and then and then we called it private_key.pem. Windows users, you'll just need to connect as normal using PuTTY. And it says, do you want to continue connecting? Yes, and there we go. So we've been able to SSH into our EC2 instance. Let's go back over and terminate this instance. So I'm just going to go in and terminate this instance state terminate, and hit yes. Now, I just want to show you how it would work with identity access management, because we have already done this when we were generating our keys. So if we go back over to encryption keys, if we go ahead and create a new key, remember that in the advanced options, instead of we had to provide a key material origin. So it would be an external KMS. So we can't actually take our public and private keys that we've just generated and put it into KMS. It's a different process. We have to do this key material origin import, basically. So do bear that in mind. You'll probably get some questions on your exam where it's talking about your public key and private key, and you're generating it to connect to a EC2 instance. That's fine. You can definitely import a public key, but you can't just import a public key into into KMS. You have to go through this generation process with Amazon, and instead of providing a public key yourself, you provide a key material origin. So I just want you to all be crystal clear as to KMS and its limitations. You cannot import a public key into KMS. You can only basically generate a customer master key using key material origin. Now, what we will look at later on in the course is Cloud HSM. That's going to be in the VPC section of the course. And what we're going to learn in that is that basically we can go in and use Cloud HSM to both generate our public key and private key. We can then export that, and then we can use that with EC2. We could also potentially go ahead and generate our own public key and private key, using OpenSSL, and then store that in Cloud HSM. You can't do that, either of those options, with KMS. So KMS is a little bit limited in that. Likewise, I can't use my KMS keys. If I go back over to EC2, I can't use that as my basically my key pairs. I can't go in and just import a key pair from KMS because I need the public key. And that brings me on to another thing, is I can't export anything from KMS either. I can't export my public key or my private key. So KMS does have a few limitations. If you really want to have full control of your keys, you're going to need to use Cloud HSM. Like I said, we're going to have a lecture on that coming up in the next section of the course. Where we can use KMS, though, is when we're using EBS, when we're encrypting our volumes and snapshots, and that is what we're going to look at in the next lecture. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture.